The morning sunlight poured across my kitchen table, golden and warm, but all I could see was the single sheet of paper waiting for me. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, the edges biting into my skin. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, looping letters that belonged to my sister. Don't bother calling. By the time you read this, the money will be gone. The words blurred. My throat locked. I opened my banking app again, desperate, but the numbers didn't change. $75,000, every cent I had, vanished overnight. It wasn't just theft. It was betrayal, and it wore my sister's face. My name is Valencia, and until that morning, I thought my life was steady, maybe even safe. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't perfect. But it was mine. Most days began the same way. Coffee brewing in the corner of the kitchen, the rich smell wrapping around me like a hug, while my daughter Ivy sat at the table, hair a little messy, notebook open. She had this habit of drawing while I packed her lunch. Tiny sketches, foxes, houses, sometimes odd machines I couldn't even recognize. At 11 years old, she seemed to live in a world that hovered somewhere between imagination and calculation. "Mom, you put the apples on top again," she'd complain gently, peeking into her lunchbox. "By noon, they'll be mush." Her voice carried more authority than a child's should, and I would laugh, rearranging things until she was satisfied. That was our rhythm. Me fumbling, her correcting, both of us somehow making it work. The house itself was modest. A small 2-bedroom on the edge of town, with peeling paint on the shutters and a leaky faucet I never found time to fix. But inside it was warm, lived in. The fridge was covered in Ivy's drawings and old photographs, family barbecues, school plays, one faded picture of me and my sister Nora when we were still close. We were smiling in that photo, arms wrapped tight around each other, like nothing could break us. I hadn't looked at it in years. Work came next. I managed the front desk at a dental clinic downtown. It wasn't the kind of job people brag about, but it was steady, and it gave me enough to build a small cushion of savings. That cushion was supposed to be for Ivy's future, for braces, for college, for the simple security I never had growing up. Every paycheck I tucked something away, bit by bit, month after month, until $75,000 quietly grew inside my account like a secret garden. And maybe that's why I let my guard down with Nora. Nora was my younger sister by 3 years. She was always the wild one. Reckless with money, reckless with men, reckless with her own promises. But she had a charm about her, the kind that made people forgive things they shouldn't. I'd forgiven her more times than I could count. I told myself she was trying, that her bad choices were just mistakes. I wanted to believe family meant second chances. The last time she visited, just a month before the betrayal, she'd brought over takeout and dropped onto my couch like she still lived here. She had a new boyfriend, Derek, tattoos snaking up his arms, a grin too slick to trust. Ivy had watched him with quiet, unblinking eyes, the way she did when she was filing something away in her mind. "You're always working so hard," Nora had said, stretching out her legs. "You should let me help with your finances sometime. You know I've got connections." I laughed it off, thinking it was one of her careless jokes. Looking back, I should have heard the warning in her voice. But that morning, standing in my kitchen with her note in my hands, Ivy watching me silently from across the table, I realized my steady world had already cracked long before the money disappeared. Trust doesn't break all at once. It frays, little by little, like a thread you keep tugging at without meaning to. With Nora, the unraveling started years ago. When we were kids, I was the responsible one. The one who packed lunches, made sure homework was done, soothed our mother when bills piled too high. Nora was the opposite. She was always disappearing, skipping school, sneaking out at night, coming home with pockets empty and stories half made up. Our father left early, so it was just the 3 of us, me, Nora, and Mom. And I learned quickly that if I didn't take care of things, no one would. Even as adults, that pattern never changed. I built stability, brick by brick. She tore hers down, then came to me with her hands out. And I gave because she was my sister. I gave when she needed money for rent. I gave when she swore this time the job would work out. I gave when she cried about a man who had broken her heart. And she always promised to pay me back. She never did. Still, I kept forgiving. Because family is supposed to mean something, isn't it? The last year, though, things had shifted. Nora wasn't just careless anymore. She was secretive. Phone calls that ended the second I walked into the room. Whispers about Derek, who seemed more shadow than man. Once, when she thought I wasn't looking, I caught her peering at my laptop screen, her eyes narrowing at the banking app one had open. "You've got a good cushion there," she'd said lightly, but there was a weight behind the words that chilled me. I laughed it off. She's just jealous, I told myself. She wouldn't dare. But deep down, something unsettled me. The night before everything collapsed, she'd shown up again uninvited. Ivy was already in bed, the house quiet. Nora smelled faintly of smoke and cheap perfume, her lipstick smudged. She sprawled on my couch like she owned it, twirling her phone between her fingers. "You're too soft, Hope," she said, her voice slurred. "You let people walk all over you. That's why you'll never get ahead." Her words stung more than I let on. I wanted to tell her I was ahead, in my own way. That stability was its own kind of victory. But instead, I just tucked Ivy's blanket tighter around her and said nothing. The next morning, she was gone. So was my money. I didn't notice at first. I was halfway through my shift at the clinic when my debit card got declined at a coffee shop. I thought it was a glitch. But when I checked my account, the screen burned into my eyes. Balance, $0. I refreshed. Again. And again. Each time, the same number stared back, hollow and merciless. The transactions scrolled down in neat lines. Withdrawals. Transfers. All signed with my name, but I hadn't touched a thing. My hands shook as I clicked open the digital receipts. The signatures looked like mine, but not quite. A cruel imitation. By the time I drove home, my chest felt like it had been caved in. I walked into the kitchen, heart pounding, and there it was, the letter. Folded once. Propped neatly on the table. Her handwriting. "Don't bother calling. By the time you read this, the money will be gone." My knees nearly buckled. I wanted to scream, to smash every dish in the sink, to drive until I found her and demand why. But I didn't. I just stood there, silent, the paper trembling in my grip. Behind me, Ivy padded into the kitchen, her socks dragging softly on the floor. She stopped when she saw me. Her big brown eyes flicked from my face to the note, then to the phone still clutched in my hand. "Mom," she asked quietly. "What happened?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came. "How do you tell your daughter that the aunt she trusted had gutted everything you'd built? How do you explain betrayal to a child who still believes the world is mostly good?" Tears blurred my vision. I turned away, ashamed. But Ivy didn't push. She didn't cry. She just walked over, slid into a chair, and folded her arms on the table like she was waiting for me to sit too. There was a strange calmness in her face, almost unnerving. That calmness was the first hint that my daughter knew more than I did. The first call I made was to the bank. I sat at the kitchen table, phone pressed tight against my ear, Ivy watching me quietly as I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm telling you, I didn't make these withdrawals," I insisted. "Look at the signatures, they're forged. That's not my handwriting." The woman on the other end sighed politely, but I could hear the doubt in her tone. "Ms. Valencia, the transactions were authorized from your account and verified with your personal details. If you believe it's fraud, you'll need to file a police report." Fraud. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. By the time I hung up, my palms were damp with sweat. I imagined the months of paperwork, the endless explanations, the hollow chance of ever seeing that money again. Worse, I imagined the questions. How could you let this happen? Didn't you see the signs? Ivy shifted in her chair. It was Aunt Nora, wasn't it? The words hit like a dart. I froze, my mouth opening and closing without an answer. Her small hands fiddled with the edge of her notebook. "You don't have to protect me, Mom." I know it was her. Something in her voice, measured, steady, made my skin prickle. "Ivy," I began slowly. "What makes you say that?" She lifted her eyes to mine. They weren't frightened, the way I expected. They were sharp, calculating. Because I've been watching her. For months. The air in the room seemed to thin. "What do you mean, watching her?" Ivy slid her notebook across the table. My hands shook as I flipped it open, expecting doodles. Instead, I saw rows of neat writing, small sketches of maps, arrows linking names to places. A child's handwriting, yes, but the content was chillingly methodical. She came here a lot. Ivy explained matter-of-factly. Always when you were tired, or when you left your laptop open. I noticed she wrote things down, so I started keeping track. I followed her sometimes, well, not far. Just when Derek picked her up. I wrote down license plate numbers. Places they went. Times she stayed out. And I checked your bank app whenever she was around. The numbers were changing even before today. My throat tightened. Ivy, why didn't you tell me? Her shoulders lifted in a small shrug. Because you love her. You always forgive her. I didn't think you'd believe me. The weight of her words crushed me. My 11-year-old had carried this secret, watching her mother's blind trust chip away at the very thing we lived on. Before I could respond, the phone rang again. The clinic. Hope, I'm so sorry, my boss said gently. There's been an issue. Some of the insurance claims you filed last week bounced. It looks like they were altered. My stomach dropped. Altered? What do you mean? They're saying the signatures don't match. We'll need to suspend your access to the system until it's cleared up. It's probably a mistake, but well, we can't take chances. The ground beneath me seemed to split open. Not only had Nora drained my savings, she'd left digital fingerprints pointing straight at me. My job, the one steady anchor, was suddenly at risk. I hung up, hands trembling, breath shallow. Across the table, Ivy was watching me with that same unnerving calm. She's trying to ruin you, Ivy said softly. But she's not as smart as she thinks. For a moment, I forgot she was a child. Her tone was too steady, her words too deliberate. I rubbed my temples. Ivy, this isn't a game. She's dangerous. Derek's worse. I don't want you involved. I already am, she replied simply. And I'm not scared. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the house settling. Ivy's words replayed in my head, each one heavier than the last. I've been watching her. For months. She's not as smart as she thinks. I got up, paced the hallway, stared at the faded photo of me and Nora taped to the fridge. Two smiling girls, arms locked. What would Mom say now if she saw us? When I finally turned toward Ivy's room, I found her sitting cross-legged on her bed, notebook open, pencil scratching in the dim glow of her lamp. She looked up at me calmly, like she'd been waiting. Mom, she said, closing the notebook with a soft snap. I think it's time you saw everything I've collected. Ivy spread the notebooks across her bed like a detective laying out evidence. Some pages were filled with messy sketches, others with dates and notes so precise they could have come from a police file. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tight in my lap, afraid to touch the pages as if they might burn me. You did all this? I whispered. She nodded. I knew Aunt Nora was planning something. She was too curious about your passwords. Too interested in your bank account. I didn't want to scare you, so I just kept track. Her words struck me deeper than she could have known. My daughter had been protecting me. While I was busy clinging to the illusion of family, she had been the one paying attention. Shame not at me. What kind of mother had I been? That an 11-year-old felt she had to take on this burden. Ivy reached out and rested her hand over mine, small but steady. It's not your fault, Mom. You trusted her. That's not wrong. She's the one who broke it. Something inside me cracked then. Not in the way betrayal had shattered me earlier, but in the way ice cracks before it thaws. For weeks, maybe years, I had been holding everything in. The exhaustion of being the steady one, the fear of failing Ivy, the quiet ache of loving a sister who only knew how to take. And now, with Ivy's eyes steady on mine, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Fire. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the living room in the dark, the faint glow of the street lamp spilling through the blinds. My heart was a storm. Fear, anger, determination all colliding. I thought about Nora's smirk, the way she used to shrug off responsibility as though the world owed her. I thought about Derek's slick grin, his arm draped possessively around her like she was both his prize and his shield. Most of all, I thought about the $75,000. Not the number itself, but what it represented. Every dollar was a sacrifice. Hours I'd spent at the clinic, nights I stayed late balancing the books, Mornings I woke before dawn to pack lunches. It wasn't just money. It was Ivy's braces. It was college. It was the chance to give her a future I never had. And Nora had stolen it like it was spare change on a counter. I stopped pacing. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. My chest rose and fell, steadying. No more. I whispered into the silence. The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. For the first time since the betrayal, I wasn't just drowning in grief. I was angry. And beneath the anger was something harder, resolve. I went back to Ivy's room. She was asleep now, her notebook still lying open beside her, pencil tucked neatly in the crease. Her breathing was soft, her small frame curled beneath the blanket. I stood there for a long moment, watching her, my throat tight. She had been the one protecting me. But it was time I protected her. Not with denial, not with excuses for Nora, but with truth. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. Ivy joined me silently, her hair sticking up at odd angles, eyes still heavy with sleep. She studied my face the way she always did when she was trying to read me. "I'm ready," I told her simply. Her eyebrows lifted. Ready for what? To fight back. For a second, her expression softened into something almost like relief. Then she reached for her notebook, flipped to a page covered in arrows and scribbles. "I already have a plan," she said. The fire in me grew stronger. I wasn't sure yet what this plan of hers involved, or how we could possibly undo the damage Nora had caused. But for the first time in days, I felt steady on my feet. Because now it wasn't just me against the betrayal. It was me and Ivy together. And I knew deep down that was enough. Ivy's plan turned out to be more sophisticated than I could have imagined. She spread her notes across the kitchen table, pointing at sketches and names like a little general laying out a battle. "First," she said, tapping her pencil on a map she had drawn, "we need to know exactly where they are. Derek always takes her to that bar on 9th Street, the one with the red neon sign. I saw his car parked there 3 times. If he's still in town, someone there will know." I blinked at her, torn between awe and disbelief. "You've been watching that closely?" She shrugged. "It wasn't hard. Aunt Nora doesn't pay attention." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Okay. Even if you're right, what do we do? Walk into a bar and demand $75,000 back?" "No," Ivy said firmly, as if I were the child. "We get proof. Proof that they took it. Proof that it wasn't you." Her words settled into me. Proof. Yes. That was the only way to clear my name at work, the only way to stop the bank from treating me like a careless liar. So we started small. That afternoon, I drove past the bar on 9th Street. Sure enough, Derek's black sedan was parked crookedly by the curb. My stomach clenched, but I forced myself to keep driving, memorizing the license plate number. At home, Ivy wrote it down in her notebook with a satisfied nod. "Now we can track him," she said. I didn't ask how an 11-year-old planned to track a grown man. I was too busy trying to quiet the pounding in my chest. The first setback came quickly. When I went back to the bank to file the fraud report, the clerk raised an eyebrow at my explanation. "So you're saying your sister forged your signature and emptied your account?" he repeated, his tone skeptical. "Do you have any evidence of that?" I hesitated. Evidence? All I had was a note, handwritten, with no legal weight, and a child's notebook full of observations that no officer would take seriously. "No," I admitted quietly. "Not yet." His expression softened, but his words didn't. "Without proof, Ms. Valencia, there's not much we can do." I left the building with a hollow ache in my chest. That night, I sat at the table staring at the stack of bills I could no longer pay. Rent, utilities, groceries. It all blurred together. I pressed my palms against my eyes, willing the tears not to come. Ivy sat across from me, her chin resting in her hands. "Don't give up, Mom. You always tell me there's a solution to every problem. We just have to find the right angle." Her faith in me was both a bomb and a knife. The next step was riskier. Ivy suggested we use Derek's carelessness against him. "He always uses his phone at the bar," she explained. "If we sit close enough, we can see who he's texting. Maybe even catch him bragging." The thought of taking my daughter into a bar made my stomach churn. Absolutely not, I said. You're 11. You're not going anywhere near Derek. She frowned. Then you go. Pretend you don't know them. Just listen. The idea terrified me. But she was right. I needed something, anything, that tied them to the theft. So the next evening, I walked into the bar, heart pounding in my throat. The smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke hit me like a wall. Music thumped low from the jukebox, and laughter rolled through the dim light. And there they were. Nora and Derek, sitting in a booth like royalty, drinks in hand. My chest tightened. Nora's laugh rang out, too loud, too careless, the same laugh she used when she was lying. Derek leaned in, phone in hand, scrolling and smirking. I slid onto a bar stool nearby, pretending to study the menu. My ears strained to catch their words. She didn't even see it coming, Derek chuckled. Whole thing was too easy. 75 grand just like that. Nora giggled, tossing her hair. My sister always did make things simple. Too trusting. My blood boiled. My nails dug crescents into my palms under the counter. I forced myself to stay still, to keep my breathing steady. I pulled my phone from my purse, hit record, and set it face down on the bar. The microphone picked up their voices, faint but clear enough. For the first time, I had something real. But when I reached for my phone a few minutes later, the bartender shot me a wary look. You okay, lady? You look pale. I mumbled something about being fine, slipped out of the bar, and drove home with my hands trembling on the wheel. Ivy was waiting at the window. When I walked in and played her the recording, her eyes lit up. This is it, she whispered. This proves everything. But she was wrong, at least for now. The next day, when I brought the recording to the police station, the officer shook his head. It's something, he admitted. But it's not enough. They'll claim it's a joke, or out of context. Without direct evidence tying them to your accounts, this won't hold up. Frustration clawed at me. Even with their words in my hand, it wasn't enough. Back home, I collapsed into a chair, burying my face in my hands. I can't do this, Ivy. They've covered their tracks too well. She knelt beside me, her small hand gripping mine. No, Mom. We just have to go deeper. Derek thinks he's untouchable. That means he's careless. We'll find something. We have to. I looked down at her, the determination in her face, the steadiness in her voice. She was only 11, but she was braver than I felt. Slowly I straightened. All right, I said, my voice low. Then we keep going. We don't stop until we have enough to bring them down. For the first time since the betrayal, the despair lifted slightly. Not gone, but lighter. Because now I had something I hadn't before, a partner. And her name was Ivy. The opportunity came faster than I expected. A week later, the clinic called me back. Hope, we're holding a staff meeting tomorrow, my boss said carefully. There have been rumors about the fraud claims. I think it's best you come in and explain. My throat tightened. Explain. As if I could explain away signatures that looked like mine missing funds, whispers about mistakes I hadn't made. That night, Ivy sat across from me at the kitchen table, flipping through her notebook. This is it, Mom. You need to show them the truth. All of it. I swallowed hard. What if they don't believe me? Then make them, she said simply. The next morning, I walked into the clinic with a folder clutched to my chest. My hands trembled, but my jaw was set. Ivy's words echoed in my ears. Make them believe. The conference room was full, doctors, assistants, receptionists. My boss sat at the head of the table, his expression heavy. A stack of altered claims lay in front of him. Hope, he began. You've been with us for years. But these discrepancies. I cut him off, my voice firmer than I felt. They weren't mine. And I can prove it. A murmur rippled around the room. I opened the folder. Inside were Ivy's meticulous notes, copies of my bank statements, and the recording from the bar. My boss frowned, leaning closer as I pressed play. She didn't even see it coming. Whole thing was too easy. 75 grand just like that. My sister always did make things simple. Too trusting. Gasps filled the room. One of the assistants covered her mouth. That's your sister? My boss asked, eyes narrowing. Yes, I said, my voice steady now. Nora Valencia. She and her boyfriend Derek forged my signature, drained my accounts, and tampered with documents that tied back to me. I know this doesn't sound like the kind of evidence you're used to seeing, but I have more. Dates, places, times, their car, even their patterns of movement. Enough to prove this wasn't me. For a long moment, silence hung heavy. My boss studied me, his gaze flicking from my trembling hands to the calm steel in my eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Leave this with me," he said. "And hope. I believe you." The relief was so sharp it nearly knocked me breathless. But the climax wasn't complete yet. Later that week, the police summoned Nora and Derek for questioning. Ivy insisted on coming with me, though she sat quietly in the waiting area while I faced them. Nora walked in first, her smile brittle. "Hope," she drawled. "What's all this about? Some silly misunderstanding." Her confidence made my blood boil, but I didn't let it show. I slid the file across the table to the officer. He opened it, flipping through Ivy's notes, the bank records, the recording. Derek shifted uncomfortably. His smirk faltered. "This doesn't mean anything," Nora snapped. "It's just her word against mine." The officer raised an eyebrow. "And this recording? This vehicle plate number? These withdrawal timestamps that match your phone's location data?" For the first time, I saw fear flicker across Nora's face. "This isn't fair," she hissed, turning to me. "You'd really do this to your own sister?" I held her gaze, my voice low but firm. "You did this to yourself." Derek cursed under his breath, slamming his hand against the table. The officer moved quickly, stepping between us. "Enough," he said. "We'll be in touch once the investigation is complete." As they were let out, Nora shot me a look I'll never forget. A mixture of fury and disbelief, like she couldn't comprehend the fact that I'd finally stopped forgiving her. Ivy slipped her hand into mine as we walked out into the sunlight. Her grip was small but steady. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I corrected softly. "We did." And for the first time in weeks, I felt air fill my lungs without weight pressing down. The truth was finally out. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet. Nora and Derek were under investigation. The money trail laid bare. It turned out Derek had funneled most of the stolen funds into gambling accounts. Sloppy, traceable, exactly the kind of recklessness Ivy had predicted. The bank assured me that once the case wrapped, most of my savings would be restored. Not all, but enough to give me a fighting chance again. At the clinic, the whispers died down. People who had once looked at me with suspicion now smiled a little too warmly, as if trying to erase their doubt. My boss pulled me aside one afternoon. "I should have trusted you sooner," he admitted, his eyes heavy with guilt. I nodded, though inside I felt a strange calm. I wasn't angry at him anymore. I had been angry enough for a lifetime already. At home, life settled back into its rhythm. Coffee in the mornings. Ivy at the table, hair messy, notebook open. Only now, the notebook wasn't full of secrets and sketches of betrayal. It held math problems, doodles of foxes, and plans for a science project she was eager to start. Still, the shadow of Nora lingered. I would catch myself glancing at the photo on the fridge. The two of us as teenagers, arms tight around each other, grinning like we'd never drift apart. I used to feel sadness when I looked at it. Now I felt something sharper, cleaner. Acceptance. Not all family deserves a place in your life. One evening, Ivy found me sitting on the porch, watching the sun sink low. The air smelled faintly of cut grass, and cicadas buzzed in the distance. She curled up beside me, tucking her knees to her chest. "Do you miss her?" she asked softly. I thought about it. Parts of her, I admitted. The sister I used to know. But that person doesn't exist anymore. Ivy rested her head against my arm. "I'm glad you see it now. I hated watching her trick you." Her words stung, but not because they were cruel, because they were true. My blind forgiveness had almost cost us everything. I put an arm around her shoulders. "You were braver than me, Ivy. You saw what I didn't want to see." She smiled faintly. "I just didn't want to lose you, Mom." My throat tightened. For years, I had thought of myself as the protector, the one shielding her from the world. But in the end, it was Ivy who had shielded me. That realization changed something deep inside. I stopped thinking of myself as broken, or foolish, or weak. Yes, I had trusted the wrong person. Yes, I had been betrayed. But I had also raised a daughter who was clever, loyal, and stronger than I ever dared to be at her age. That had to mean I'd done something right. A month later, I closed my bank app and smiled at the balance. Not perfect, but enough to breathe again. Enough to start rebuilding. That night, I tucked Ivy into bed. She clutched her favorite worn blanket, eyelids drooping. Before she drifted off, she whispered, "You won't forgive her again, right?" "No," I said firmly. "Not this time." And I meant it. As I turned out the light, I felt lighter than I had in years. The betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had burned away the illusions, stripped me bare, and left behind something harder, truer. Not just for me, but for Ivy too. Because from now on, she would grow up knowing the truth. Strength isn't about pretending everything is fine. Strength is facing the cracks, the hurt, and still choosing to stand. And together, that's exactly what we did. Some nights, when the house is still and Ivy's breathing has settled into that soft, steady rhythm of sleep, I lie awake staring at the ceiling. The silence isn't heavy anymore. It feels like space, room to think, to heal, to grow. I think about the morning I found Nora's note. How the sunlight seemed to mock me as my whole world collapsed. I remember the way my hands shook, the taste of salt and metal on my lips as panic set in. Back then, I thought it was the end. But endings and beginnings are harder to tell apart than I once believed. Nora took more than money. She stripped away the illusion that family is always safe, that loyalty is automatic. She forced me to see the cracks I'd been painting over for years. And Ivy, my 11-year-old daughter with her sharp eyes and stubborn courage, was the one who caught me when I fell. She taught me that protection doesn't always flow one way. Sometimes children carry their parents through the fire. I've stopped asking myself why Nora did it. Some answers only corrode the soul. Instead, I focus on what remains. A home rebuilt not on blind trust, but on honesty. A bond between mother and daughter that has been tested in the harshest way and proven unbreakable. On the fridge, the photo of Nora and me still hangs. I keep it there not out of longing, but as a reminder. Betrayal is a kind of mirror. It shows you what you refused to see. And in that reflection, I found something unexpected. Strength, clarity, freedom. I will never be the same woman I was before my sister's note. I am quieter now, sharper, and perhaps a little harder. But I am also steadier. I have learned that survival isn't about holding on to what's lost. It's about carrying forward what cannot be taken. So when morning sunlight floods my kitchen again, I don't flinch. I make coffee. I listen to Ivy's chatter. I let the warmth touch my face. And I whisper to myself with a certainty I once thought impossible. We are enough.